Good morning, everybody. This is a special Mornings with Greg show. I hope I have all the logistics worked out. You never know on these live things. But we're going to have a very special person being interviewed today by the We're Only Human podcast, hosted by Tim John. And that person is me. I've agreed to do a podcast recording, and the conditions on which I would apply, or the conditions on which I would agree to do the podcast recording interview for the We're Only Human podcast was that I could live broadcast the entire interview to you as my morning show. So you're going to get to learn some stuff about me if you were ever curious about my history and all of the little weird things I've been through to get me to this point. There have been a lot. So yeah, we're gonna get into that today with Tim John, who's going to join us in just a little bit. So I'm gonna go get my mushroom cocoa, and I'll be back with you shortly. You'll notice I'm not wearing the hoodie. I want today to be an especially vulnerable day or interview moment. I don't know. I figured that the hoodie would help me shroud myself. And so today I am no holds barred as far as in this interview goes. So we'll see what he asks me. All right. See you in a minute. Good morning, everybody. So, if you were on earlier, a moment ago, before I got my mushroom cocoa, you heard me saying that this is a very special Mornings with Greg show. Last night, oh my god. Wake up, Greg. It's the morning. Hey, what's up, David? What's up, Lewis? So yesterday we had a really great panel discussion with PR music professionals from around the world. Yeah, we had some people from different countries. You can say that. We had Canada. And tomorrow morning we have a very special panel of people who have started festivals and own record labels and are pulling some of the strings in the music industry and helping us figure out how we're going to move forward in this crazy COVID economy. But today is a little bit of a break in the exploring all that other stuff about current world events, and today we're just going to talk about me. Yay! I've invited Tim John, and I've known him for 15 years and I still might be pronouncing his last name wrong, but Tim is a longtime friend of mine who well, you know what? I'm going to save the rest of this introduction for when he's on with me in just a moment. And anyway, Tim has a blog called what's it called? Well, I can't remember the name of it, but he'll tell you in a second. He has a blog and he wanted to interview me for the podcast that he does. And I told him that if he wanted to do that, I would happily do it, but I would have to do it on my morning show live and share it with you. So, I guess here we go. Let's turn this music down and bring him in. Here we go. We're going to go to our Zoom. Participants, admit Tim into the room, and bring up our guest panel here so that you guys can, okay, change that screen to the Zoom screen.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you yet.
It's like how every Zoom conversation starts. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see your image yet.
Oh, weird. I can see you.
Well.
And my camera is on and I can see me seeing you.
Huh. Well, let's see here. Why don't we, oh yeah, I think it might be a connection thing because it has like little red things on the, oh, there you are. Haha.
I'm there.
Tim John, everybody. Is that actually the right way to pronounce your last name? I feel terrible after like 15 years of knowing each other that I'm not really sure. Is it Jan or John?
No, it is John. You have it right.
Okay, good. Because it's spelled like Jan, and I always think it should sort of be Jan, but yeah.
Yeah, it's German, I believe, and I think at one point it was Jan, but nowadays, at least here with my family, it's John.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I have German roots too. My family is originally from Speyer in Germany, like a little Jewish tribe out there.
Oh,
And
nice.
we migrated to Poland and then eventually to the U.S. So we have actually many generations in Krakow as well.
You've done more research into your family than I have into mine. I've told you the extent of what I know.
Yeah. Here we go. So I'm setting this up so we have a sort of an even planed interview screen here. I've never actually done an interview of myself on my show before, so this is going to be fun. Is this all officially part of your podcast now, or are we going to like say 3, 2, 1 and start?
Probably that. I'll introduce you, and then
Okay.
we can chat at least for the podcast recording.
Okay, fantastic. I think that everything is working here on my end. I'm going to just make sure that I can see everybody's.
I'm gonna hit
Comments
record on
and
my
things.
end. It is working on my end. Awesome.
Yeah, and we got some people viewing, so people haven't all left now that they know I'm going to be talking about myself. That's nice. Okay.
It's good to get to know the guy behind the morning show.
The guy behind the morning show, totally.
That's what the
Man behind
documentary's
the
in.
piano. Yeah, I even didn't wear the traditional hoodie this morning because I wanted to be in more of an open, sort of vulnerable. It's We're Only Human, right? That's the name of your podcast. In fact, I wrote it down.
Yes,
there.
We're Only Human is the name of the podcast. And I will say that I love that you're not wearing the hoodie and that you're wearing the black t-shirt because as long as I've known you, I felt you've had a uniform. And in a good way, this isn't a bad thing. But you have like a presence, I guess like a uniform. So and this is it right here. So I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, you know what? It's funny. My uniform changed a little bit since the time that we knew each other, but then it sort of went back to original it's simplicity. My uniform is defined by simplicity because I don't like making decisions that I don't have to make. So I just buy 30 black t-shirts of the same size and same brand so that whenever when I'm getting dressed, I don't have to pick between anything except for these comfortable black t-shirts, which are also very inexpensive. I get these. I'm on Uniqlo. For the past 5 years, it's been Uniqlo. Before that, I think it was Zara. But I'm very particular about the black t-shirt. Oh, hey, Wendy is watching. She says black shirt is definitely part of your uniform. And it used to be sweatpants. Now it's Adidas track pants, but it used to be just black sweatpants from Target that I got for $10. And then there was a period of maybe 2 years where I was dressing very Metro and wearing all sorts of sequins and other stuff. I guess it's another side of my personality that came out when I was engaged to somebody who was a PR expert, and I was kind of thinking about that side of what I was doing. But then now, single again, so I'm back to the black t-shirt and sweatpants.
It's a great example though of how you can learn from everyone that crosses paths with you.
Oh,
You
yeah.
take a little bit of something from that.
Oh my God, I've learned from so many amazing people in my life. I'm so lucky to have been able to interact with people who know so much more than me about so many things.
Definitely. That's what it's all about.
I just want to make sure before we start your official interview, are we getting an echo or anything? Because I have you on my speakers so that I don't have to wear headphones. And so crowd, people listening, tell me if there's an echo and if you can hear everything fine. You should be able to hear things fine, but I'll be watching the chat for a little bit. If I start to get really deep into it, I might close the chat out so that I can be more present. But yeah, for now, let me know if there are any audio issues. You can hear Tim fine. I can hear Tim great. So
And I can hear you great.
yeah, I think we're cool. All right.
We're on the right path.
Yeah, man. So
Cool.
do you want to start? Do you want to take over? I'll give you the reins to the show.
Sure. I will just do a quick intro so that I have it for the podcast, and then we can chat.
great.
And for those listening, just so they have some context, as you mentioned, the podcast is called We're Only Human. It's we'reonlyhumanpodcast.com. And it's all about celebrating the resiliency of the human spirit and getting to know people from all walks of life and the journeys that kind of brought them to where they are today. Because as I mentioned, you can learn something from anyone that you cross paths with. So it's fun to bring that all together and learn together. So yeah, I'll go ahead and introduce you for the podcast, and then we can chat. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Sweet. Today I'm joined by Greg Spiro, who is a son, a brother, pianist, and leader of the jazz band Spirit Fingers. He's also toured with Halsey and composed music for all sorts of TV, film, and other projects. And as you were mentioning earlier, Greg, before we started recording, we've known each other for quite some time. So here's what I did. You and I have exchanged way too many emails over the years, especially when we were working together back in the day.
Yeah.
So I found the first time we emailed, it was the summer of 2007. And here, correct me if I'm wrong, here's how I remember it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I get out of school and I'm doing web development at the time. And this is what's in my mind. I think it's accurate. And I hop on Craigslist because where else would you find web development work? Mm-hmm. And I think you were working on all sorts of websites or clients. Mm-hmm. And I think you had an ad, and I think we connected on there, and then we started working together building websites. Mm-hmm.
Oh, you cut out for a second.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah. So I heard websites. That was the last word.
Oh, I was saying, I think we connected then, and we were started working on websites. And I was curious, am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah. Absolutely. That is it. I do remember. 2007 was when I graduated from University of Illinois in Champaign, and I had built up my web development company before that. And as I was getting to the end of that, I got to the point where I was totally overwhelmed and had way too many clients and needed help. So I put out an ad on Craigslist. I was like, please, other developers, come help me out. And you were, I guess you were one of the people who responded. I didn't realize that it was from that ad that you came into my life. But yeah, I
think it was. Okay. Yeah, because I was on Craigslist at the time looking for work. Fresh college graduate. 2007 too, different world back then. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. It's kind of ironic hearing you say that you were so overwhelmed with work you had to find help, which is amazing. And then I was on the opposite end of the spectrum. I was trying to find some work, period. So it was fate that we met.
Yeah, I love that. And you speak to one of the things that has played out over and over again in my life, that one of the skills I've had is sort of enterprising and creating demand for something, and then like being overwhelmed by that thing. And so then I always have to get help, and that's been one of the biggest learning experiences for me have come from when I've had help and I've had to then interact with people who are helping me, which is the hardest thing in the world, because there's so many dynamics. And it's actually simpler in the context that you and I were doing it, because I was paying you for developing and had my clients paying me an hourly rate. I think it was I would charge like $80 an hour and pay out $60 an hour. So I made $20 an hour for the people that I hired or something like that, right? So that was simple and cut and dry, and I was able to outsource work and do all that. But then as I grew after that and got into different scenarios, like the Tiny Room series, when I eventually kicked the whole business addiction and went back fully into music and took up that other addiction, and then started enterprising in that direction, it actually was a lot more difficult, because there's so many other social dynamics and ego dynamics to bands and people who are working on a like creative series, like a video series where everybody's invested in emotionally into it. And the business world was actually easier than the arts world at that point.
Yeah, I would imagine too, in the arts world there's so much more competition, or at least on like a personal level. You mentioned that you asking, or you would get overwhelmed creating different things and then getting to a point where you're overwhelmed and need help and you had to ask for help. Is that something like you were okay doing and you felt naturally like that's the next step? Or were you like, okay, I have to ask for help and I don't want to because why shouldn't I be able to do this myself?
No, I was excited to do it. I wanted to get rid of as much of the work off my plate as possible. And you also have to remember, this was not my passion. I'm a jazz pianist. This was a period of my life where I was convinced I was not going to be able to make a living on music, and I needed to do other things to make a living. And one of the things, and that actually stems largely from my grandpa's influence, because my parents were very open in terms of like, do whatever you want, and whatever. They were like, we don't really know, so you figure it out. But
That's fair.
but my grandpa was adamant. He was like, listen, you gotta meet a nice Jewish girl and have a nice family and like find a job in something economical, like being a stockbroker or a business person or whatever, or a doctor. And I mean, I remember these conversations with him. He was like, you think about this stuff because it's going to be a lot, like, you'll probably be a lot happier if you take this path, is what he thought. I don't know if he would have been right or not. I don't think he was right in the end. Having taken the other path that he did not suggest, I can't imagine my life having gone in down the path of just doing something that allowed me to have more of a traditional living.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that at the time we had met, because especially when we met, I met you in the context of technology and web development and building businesses and helping grow businesses and clients and all this stuff. And, as I got to know you, I got to know the music side of you, and I could tell that's where your passion lied, because I'm very similar, like, having different slices of my life, some that are, there to help support my life and some that are creative outlets and things. Mm-hmm. And I saw that with you. I didn't realize though that you've always been a musician, prior to that, and you were kind of on like not a break, but you were trying to figure it out. And especially looking back now, I mean, look at what you've accomplished. Like I texted you Monday night, I didn't realize you were on Saturday Night Live. Mm-hmm. And, I'm watching the video when you're playing with Halsey in January of 18. And Greg, you're right there. I mean, it's you on the stage in Studio One, what is it, 1H? And
yeah, whatever it's called.
Yeah, and I was like, geez, Louise. I mean, that's amazing. Oh my gosh, I have to ask about this. So first of all, there's so much between when you're working with me and clients in 2007. How can we say 2007, but then we say 2017? Side note.
2007, it's the aughts.
Yeah, but then, so how did you end up though with Halsey? I mean, this is and first of all, I don't mean this in a like, how did you of all people, Greg? No, I mean, of course you're the one, doing amazing work like this. But I'm just curious, like, you don't just one day end up playing on stage with a pop star at Saturday Night Live. Like there's a lot of work involved and a lot of, journey. So I'm curious, how did you end up there?
Man, I was reflecting on this last night when I was talking to my cousin about certain experiences. No, actually, it was a friend who I was talking to about certain experiences in my life, and I've had this happen multiple times in my life where I don't know why, but something very, very, very unlikely seems to happen, and I don't know exactly what I contribute to that unlikely thing happening, other than some basic principles that I have always functioned on to some degree, but have also refined as I've gotten older and come to understand more as I've gotten older. And the Halsey thing, I can talk about the cause and effect that led to it, but a lot of it's luck. It's because if you think about the gravity of a situation like that, how many, in terms of success, I feel like in terms of success for a working pianist, right? I sort of hit that level. I hit success in that realm. Like people who are growing up in music school, or they want to be a pianist or whatever, once they're playing on stage solo in front of 15,000 people and they're improvising and they're playing with a great singer and doing duets, and there are people screaming and flailing at their at the harmonic developments, which I didn't think pop audiences were capable of doing, but I found gradually as I gained more freedom in the Halsey project that they were, and that's actually what led to the Tiny Room project. But doing that, it's like, okay, I've made it to some degree, right?
Yeah, I mean, is that what you would define? You mentioned like you achieve success as a working pianist. Is that success like simply just getting paid to do what you love?
Yes, I mean, I was getting paid very well to do what I love and getting tons of attention for it from all these different media sources, sponsorships from major instrument companies, a demand from all sorts of other pop artists. I can't tell you how many other jobs I got offered during the time I was with Halsey, and also like the gratitude from, you want to be recognized for playing piano if you're a pianist. It's one of those ego things, right? Like you want the world to feel like, okay, he's good, and I got that. So I got the money, the notoriety, the internal recognition from the business community and the fans, but I gave it all up entirely. I quit, and I mean it was a soft quit. I pissed them off so much that they were like, you can, the deal was I could stay if I like compromised a lot of my laurels, and so I decided no, let's take this as a parting, as a decent parting situation, and we love each other. We both respect the talent in the other's party, but
Sure.
it's like I couldn't compromise certain things about myself and my artistic path in order to keep participating in that. So I decided to move on and give up that entire world. And I have not I've been offered some pop tours since then too, but I've gave them up. I mean, I turned them down.
Was this truly a case of like creative differences, where just like your vision for what your creative future looks like just differs from what what they were offering?
No, it wasn't just creative differences, because there were creative differences from the beginning. We, I mean, I knew it wasn't. She even said that to me. She recognized it, because one of the laurels, I guess, the values that I hold is being unbridledly honest, and I'm still working on that in some areas of my life, particularly with people that I want to like me and that I want to impress. But because I grew up, it's sort of like the nice guy syndrome, right? And I grew up being kind of a nice guy, and over the past 5 years have learned to be sometimes the antithesis of that, which people say I'm a total asshole now sometimes, but it's so much better than trying to say the things to make people like you. And I already had that sort of instilled in me at the time. So when we started, like, she even said to me once, she was like, "It's funny that I'm the only one who actually wants to be playing this music." When she talked to when she was talking to the band, and like everybody else was there as hired people, because I mean, we loved the music. It's great music, and she's a great artist, but it wasn't our passion. My passion was jazz. Everybody knew that. I made him take a fucking piano on tour so that I could practice, like, in the off hours. There's a photo of me outside of the tour bus on one of the earlier tours in the fall, where I'm wearing gloves because it's so cold outside, and I have the wire strung back into the tour bus so it can get power, and I'm practicing for hours outside of the tour bus, like with like leaves around. You can tell it's a funny photo. Some people have said it's indicative of some things that of like the work ethic. That's another one of the laurels.
What were you practicing? Were you practicing
Scales
for the tour, or were you practicing
scales. Just
anything?
rudiments? And in fact, I didn't have the understanding of music that I have now. If I did, I probably would have practiced different things. But at the time, it was the same routine. I made sure to do a 2-hour routine of scales, exercises, Hanon, Behringer. I don't actually know if it's Behringer or Behringer in this part, because there is Behringer, but I'm pretty sure these exercises are from a composer named Behringer. and then some classical pieces that I had learned earlier that I made sure to keep doing every day to reinstill that, because you lose it quickly. Like, I mean, even Mozart said that if he doesn't practice for a day, he notices. If he doesn't practice for 2 days, his like close people, like the orchestra notices. If he doesn't practice for 3 days, the audience notices.
That's interesting.
And I knew that this wasn't the end all for me. I didn't want to be a 50-year-old sideman for a pop artist, you know? Like,
is that what you were having visions of, like, as you were getting into this, thinking?
It wasn't that I was having visions of that, because I knew I wouldn't stay that long. I know enough about myself to know that I'll jump ship if the shit is sailing towards the continent that I don't want to be on. You know, I'll jump out and swim in the ocean until I find the next boat, or try to build my own boat while I'm swimming, which is sort of what I'm doing now, which is a little silly.
Yeah, that must have been hard though. Even, I mean, you know, even if you know this is not my passion for the future, or, you know, this isn't my long-term play, that had to have been a hell of an experience. So, I mean, even when you decided this is going to be it, I imagine there had to be some piece of you that was going to miss that.
Oh, are you kidding? Yeah, I missed the hell out of it. Making that level of income regularly, first of all, like, Jesus Christ. It's one of those things that, I mean, there may be like 20 or 30 pianists in the world who are in that position in their life. Like, or not, and maybe not in their life, simultaneously. Like, at this time, there may be 20 or 30 bands that pay that well and have that level of exposure and that level of camaraderie too. I mean, I loved those guys. Like, I still love them. And they're so hardworking. The management team, and then the music director Vinny, like, and Nate the drummer, they're all super talented in their own right of what they do. That's why they were there. So it was such a great tribe to be a part of, and it was also like paying great, and I was getting a ton of exposure. And if I had done that for 3 more years, I would have been being paid even more, and, like, you know, would have been even more successful in that trajectory. But that wasn't my trajectory, so I decided I would start over, essentially.
And starting over, so you were working, so tell me, the Spirit Fingers, it was, what was it called before? I never could pronounce that word. Polyrhythmic.
That's why we changed the name, is because nobody could fucking pronounce it. Can I swear on your podcast?
Yes. What's that?
Can I swear on your podcast, by the way?
Well, yeah, you just did. Okay, why not?
Cool. Just making sure. Just I try not to.
There's no rules in the
but
land of podcasting.
I know.
Spirit Fingers, I love the name, but so this is here's the sense I get. This is kind of your passion project. Like, this is, it's not your thesis, but this is like what you want to focus on. But did this come about after Halsey, or was this something? Because I know you. I mean, I was watching you back when you were in Chicago. What was it, Andy's?
Yeah, you videotaped us. You came in a close up too.
Yeah, at the Jazz Club.
Yeah, you made. So, you made the first videos that I have of myself that are from, like,
really?
2010.
Wow.
Like, both the from Close Up 2 and then from the weekly piano thing. That was like, you were doing those.
Yeah, I saw that you still have some of those on your weekly piano YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Close Up 2. So I remember you were always in a jazz band from what I understand. I mean, you were always playing gigs.
I started playing in my dad's blues band when I was 14 years old.
14 years old? Yep. Were they playing in bars and stuff?
Yeah, they were. It was smoky bars. I still love the smell of cigarette smoke because of that. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, but when I am in an area where people are smoking, it's like...
You know, I'm the same way. I will never smoke, and I have never smoked, but I love the smell of cigarette smoke.
Yeah, it's weird.
Which I think, Greg, is actually worse for us. Like, secondhand smoke is gonna, know.
Well, I don't get exposed to it that often, so
that's good.
But I was,
so
I was 14 years old. I still have visions of it because it was so exciting for me as a 14-year-old. I remember we set up a.
Was that a freshman in high school?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so you're in a bar setting up.
Yeah, we were in a bar, and we would set up. I have a vision in my mind of setting up a wooden plank on a pool table, so we weren't standing directly on the pool table, and setting up my dad's keyboard rig, which is an organ and whatever, to this Leslie speaker, sitting there, and so that was the organ rig, and then on the other side of the bar there'd be the piano rig with a different piano, and my dad and I would switch off. One of us would play organ and one of us would play piano.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, that must have been the most fun. And I mean, you, from what I know, I mean, your dad and you and your family, you seem to have a very close knit family, and your dad and you have a great
I'm
relationship.
so lucky. Yeah, we have
Yeah.
such
So I
a
mean,
tight
doing that with
family.
your dad must have been like what would be cooler? I can't think of a cooler thing. You know what I mean? Than
Mm-hmm.
playing with your musician dad, who we should mention is also a very great musician. And
I think
I
he's watching
mean,
right now too.
oh, is he?
Yeah,
Hi, Greg's dad.
Peter.
So I
Peter's
mean,
great.
playing in the bar with him on, I'm smiling because as a father myself, if that was my situation and I had that sort of thing, being musicians,
I forgot
that's
you're a
it. You've
dad.
reached the best.
I forgot you're a dad, man. That's awesome. I can't wait to be a father one day. I got to meet the right girl first, but I'm so excited for fatherhood at some point in my life. Oh no, you cut out. That's an awkward silence to have after that. I'll wait for you to come back. Oh, my mom's watching too. I'll catch up with the comments while Tim is coming back to us. Um and oh yeah, Jesse Henson's on here. Oh, here, wait, there's Tim asking to come. Oh, you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, sweet.
You hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you. I didn't hear what you said after I last spoke.
Oh, I was just saying, yeah, well, A, fatherhood's awesome. And B, I can imagine you and your son or daughter playing, the gigs when they're
I'm gonna be
14 or-
obsessed, man. It's gonna be problematic. I'm gonna be so obsessed with my kids.
So, 14, were you playing music earlier on than that with your family? Like, because your mom is your mom a pianist and
Yep.
your dad's also a musician?
My mom's a pianist too. She's watching now too, and she and I have this argument. I feel like I took lessons from her for maybe like 2 years when I was younger, because I remember learning the Moonlight Sonata, and then some other like little pieces. But for the most part, I don't think I was willing to actually take lessons. I wasn't willing to like sit down at the piano with her, other than for a couple years of my childhood, because I just was not. I've always had this weird thing where I only want to do what I want to do, and I'm still that way. It's really fucked up. Like, it causes a lot
Like
of problems.
Like you don't want to take the direction of a teacher. You just want to kind of experiment and play
Yeah.
and figure it out.
Yeah, that's one of and it manifests in that way as a kid. Like, I loved figuring stuff out on the piano, and my dad would play stuff, and I'd be like, "Hey, Dad, what are you doing?" And he would show me. I remember there was this earlier thing, and I can actually, I've got my piano hooked up here, so I could play. It was called Dance, and it was like just some really simple blues thing that was like. And it goes on, it's like it's a blues form, but that's like, little simple things like that I still remember. I haven't played that in 20 years, but I still remember it, and because it was so like ingrained. in my mind,
Yeah.
from the experiences with my parents. So I would ask them about stuff, and if my mom was playing something really pretty, I would ask her. I think I'd ask her to. Well, I would always hear her play Debussy, and that was beyond me until college, because I didn't actually take formal lessons until college, other than that tiny bit with my mom. And then when I was in college, I started learning some of the stuff that my mom would play that I would always hear her, like Clair de Lune, you know that one?
I feel like I've heard it. It's just one of those like beautiful snippets that make you smile.
Yeah. Debussy is the best. Debussy, Ravel, Chopin.
Wait,
Yeah.
so,
Sorry, go on.
so in college, you went to college for musical training, right?
Yeah.
Or I mean, for music.
Well, half the colleges I applied to were in computer science,
Really?
and half
So
were in
again,
music.
that kind of half and half.
Yeah,
But,
I was so torn, man. I didn't know what I would do because I loved music so much. But again, and Jesse Henson commented, "Don't blame it on Bop." But he was the only force that my grandpa was the only force that I had really telling me like you should not do this music thing like that because he saw my parents do it and how hard it was for them. My dad, he was. I mean, my dad had a moderate level of success in music when he was my age. Like he was touring in stadiums, opening for I think REO Speedwagon or something like that with his band. I think it might have been Kevin Lee and the Lonesome City Kings or Mesa. I mean, he was part of some bands that had some success, and
yeah, that's
then,
pretty amazing.
but it never became financially stable enough for him to sustain our family, and eventually he took on other jobs like in the tech world and like so that he could support us in the way that he wanted to support us, which I am there's a depth of gratitude that I live with every single day knowing that. And I think that one of the reasons that I work so hard because I know what my dad gave up in order to give me what I have. And
So your grandpa then was just, I mean, he's being practical based on what he knew and what he saw. So I mean,
exactly
that kind of makes sense.
And my
Yeah.
grandpa, man, I love my grandpa so much. He's still alive. He's 92 years old now. We just had his birthday the other day.
Is he when we used to do weekly piano?
That was
I
his
used
house.
to come over
Yeah,
to your
yeah.
grandpa's house. Yeah, and
That was him.
I remember he would be sleeping or something, and we would go in another room, and we would make the
Yeah,
piano
he'd probably be
videos.
sleeping. He took a lot of naps. My
Sure,
grandma
I mean,
was there
92,
too.
wow.
R.I.P. My grandma Mimi. I lived there for several years after college, at their house while I saved money, and which I eventually used to move to L.A. And those are also some of the experiences that made me who I am today. Like living with old people is something I would recommend kids do for some extended period of their life because it gives you such a perspective of everything in life. It gives you a perspective of what's important. To like I watched as my grandparents' friends were passing away, and the experiences they had with those people and the and having heart-to-hearts with my grandma and grandpa afterwards and seeing the strength in my grandpa and seeing the love in my grandma and the compassion of people who have lived that long. I like those years that I spent at their house while I was just doing it for the purpose of saving money. I was making enough to have an apartment somewhere, but I was, that's one of the other things that I, for whatever reason, have done my whole life is live as far below my means as I possibly can, and that's it's an experience that I wouldn't give up for the world. I mean, partially because my grandma's not with us anymore, and I feel so grateful to have had those experiences with her.
Oh yeah, how nice is that?
And then also, you know, my grandpa's with us, but he's not all there now. He's like he's still happy and he's still kicking, but you know, I can't have the depth of intellectual conversation and play chess with him and all the things that I did when I was living at his house. And
It's an amazing experience too, because I mean, what a gift that they gave you, and you being able to spend that time with them and get to know them that you might not, you know, otherwise. But then also the reverse, the gift you gave to them, you know, that time they got to spend with you, especially your grandma.
It was the biggest mutual gift it's probably the most important mutual gift of my life, other than my being born by my parents, is having that time with my grandparents. And not only that, like the things that keep me going now, like the values that I hold in terms of personal responsibility and dealing with the hard shit in a certain way. It's like my grandpa did that in a way that only that generation did. I think it got softened generation by generation. Like in the baby boomer era, it got softened a little bit, and in the millennial, whatever you call people now that I'm a part of, but I'm like at the tip of the millennial era. I think I'm 35.
Oh yeah, it depends what article you read, what generation we're in. There's
But
two or three
man,
different
people
options.
got so nice and so soft and so like so blamey people like like more and more so from my grandpa's generation to where we are now, like putting the responsibility of the bad outside and the responsibility of the good inside. It's this terrible epidemic of thought in society right now that I believe is ever present and has gotten worse generation after generation. My grandpa was the antithesis of that. Like, I remember one time I was sitting this is a very tiny example, but it's exemplary of it. I was sitting at the brunch table. We would have brunch every family, also the family values and keeping family tight knit. Like, we would have, because of my grandma mostly, but then my grandpa supported it, obviously, not partially because he was the breadwinner, but my grandma was the one who took the initiative to have the family together every Sunday, like extended family, and just to hang out and have brunch.
Oh, that's so much fun.
And it's like so simple, but what families do that now? Like extended cousins and everybody coming together and being so comfortable and like nothing, you being with a group of people where you know nothing you could say or do will make them not love you. And that sort of experience, it's like those experiences that my grandparents curated, they were indicative of their values that they held from a certain generation. And I mean, my grandma got married to my grandpa. I think my grandpa was 22 or 23. My grandma was 19, and they spent their entire life together until my grandma died. And I remember my grandma making us fresh squeezed orange juice, which is like, now we're all just drinking this sugar water. And holding the family together. And the example I was going to tell you was I was taking driving lessons. I was sitting and I had missed a lesson or something. I forgot about it. And I was sitting at the table, and my mom was like, yeah, I forgot to remind him about the lesson. And I was like, yeah, I'll just blame that on my mom for this one. And my grandpa was like, hey, no, you do not blame that on your mom. You missed your fucking driving lesson. I think he swore a little bit or something like that. He never swore, but I think in that time he said something that made it really stick. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, you're right. I like, I mean, however young I was, but I was like, yeah, I have to take responsibility for that. But that sort of situation came up in all sorts of other things. And then he also took responsibility for giving me these experiences, like took me to watch the sunrise in the morning. And just took me to the museum for the overnight sleepovers at the museum. Like I'll stop talking about my grandpa, but it's just, you can see it's such a deep part of my.
Oh yeah,
who I am
no,
now.
I think it's fantastic. I think that's amazing, and it shows so much of where you learned so much and derive so much of what you value. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and a lot of my family thinks I'm just the worst thing ever right now because I have some of those values that are from earlier generations. And there are things that are that are negative about those generations, right? Like racism was a lot more prevalent at that point. And yes, like everybody wants to get rid of racism now. And like I'm very progressive in terms of that's the obvious social shit, right? Like we need to function as a world and as a human society, all people are equal and all of that. But then the things like the other elements that I talk about with my close family that are indicative of my grandpa's mindset, it's like there are such heavy disagreements between the current generation and like 2 generations ago on some issues that are very important and how people deal with them. And like, so, some of it you can't even, like, it's so popular to have this one viewpoint that you can't even really go into it because it just ends up being a total shit show, and people are so wrapped up in their own personal viewpoints that they can't open their mind to thoughtfulness about a subject in a genuine way.
I love that to me, you always have stood for just this idea of like unity and peace, and we're all one collective, whatever it is. And I've always admired that about you, but I feel your kind of presence in that sense so much more now during this COVID time, where I feel like it's really brought that out, that we really are, all together in on this. So,
oh yeah,
it's just, yeah.
Well, the things that bring us together historically are war and famine.
Interesting.
You know, the worst things in history are the things that make us the most cohesive as a human race, because we have something to fight against. It's like we're all so dumb in the way that we function as a species in day-to-day life, like throughout the majority of our history. And it's because of evolution. It's because of the way that because we're animals that have certain tendencies, and a lot of those tendencies no longer serve us. And so, like, you know, we have people who are, there's a combination of not taking personal responsibility for anything, because that's something we're sort of programmed to do if we can, and then like blaming on the other, because that's something we're sort of programmed to do as we can. And it goes back to tribes, when like the other tribe was the one that would kill you, and the internal tribe was the one that would keep you safe. And like, you know, and you were also probably going to starve in the first place, because for the majority of human history we were like just gathering berries and mushrooms and trying to kill a rabbit so that we could have sustenance. But the things that make us like realize that we have to come together as a world and not say like other I don't like you is like when we are all threatened by an external source. Just wait till aliens come to Earth, man.
I was going to say, it's like Independence Day with Bill Pullman.
Yeah.
That's going to be the ultimate, when we all have to get together.
This is Independence Day. This is an alien. The COVID virus, the COVID-19, the coronavirus, it's like an internal alien. It's a new species that is attacking our species that is like eating us from the inside out. And so we're like, okay, yeah, we need to fight against this other species. And the only way we can do it is by protecting ourselves in the ways that we know how, by coming together. But it's also pointing a finger at some of the terrible aspects of humanity too. And you know, it's such a two-sided argument. Like the things to do to fight against this virus and to get over it, it's such a double-edged. Either way you take it, there's a double-edged sword. Because there's no right way, and there's no like, people are gonna die, and we're gonna have the economy tanked, and everything's gonna suck for a period of time. So like, how are you gonna balance it? And you know, there are valid arguments to either side of both the like super liberal version of like we all come together and we quarantine and don't let anybody die, but then the super conservative of like, actually people need to die and they're going to die anyway, and like numbers are skewed in different ways, and you're like quarantining people to the point where they are eventually going to starve and rebel. Like, so there are these two, but that's also something that I try to do in every facet of when I decide to have an opinion on something, which I try to not have an opinion on most things, is like really dig into the two sides of an argument when an argument exists. And that's why so many people just despise me, because I actually look at both sides of an argument. So if you're wrapped up in one side of an argument to the point where you can't see the validity of the other side of the argument, which is like 95% of people, then you're going to think somebody who sees both sides of the argument is just the worst thing ever.
Which is terrible, because I agree with you. I think that's the way to approach it. Even if you do have an opinion, and if you do have, you know, a side that you're on, I think it's so important to understand and empathize where the other side is coming from. Or, you know, it's so dangerous to just be so divisive and not at least understand where people are coming from on the other side. You know, like it's...
Well, and by the nature of politics and media, the only thing that we are exposed to is divisiveness on a mass scale. Yeah. Because there are two sides, and those two sides are self-perpetuating at this point. Like, to not have divisive inputs, you need to have genuine one-on-one conversations with somebody who is willing to look beyond their bias, and you're not going to get that from the government. You're not going to get that from the media. So it makes it hard.
Yeah, it does. You know, I'm looking at your black T-shirt. Before we started recording, we were talking about your black T-shirt uniform and how you have a bunch of them. But you had referenced a time in the past being engaged and, you know, kind of learning from that. And which I remembered, I was looking when we were texting the other day, somehow I scrolled up my text, and we were, about 4 years ago, we were talking about something. And I was like, oh, how's life? And you're like, oh, I, just moved down to Atlanta, I got engaged. I was like, oh, congrats, awesome.
Oh, we're gonna go to that.
And then like we didn't really talk much after that, and then you just mentioned it before, so and obviously you just mentioned you're single, so I'm just a little curious.
Yeah.
There's a little chapter there that obviously closed, which my condolences to that chapter closing, although maybe it was for the better.
It needed to happen.
But it sounds like you found love, and then maybe not yet.
Oh yeah, I found the most intoxicating and most amazing love I've ever experienced in my life, which is why I asked this love to marry me after 3 months of knowing her.
Oh my goodness, that's exciting.
Oh, it's a great story, man. If you want to write a romance novel, like just look at my my history. We met while I was on tour with Halsey, playing an arena, opening for the Weeknd, and we became completely infatuated with each other, and I flew her out to where was it? Flew her to Paris, and bought a ring, and asked her to marry me on stage in front of 3,000 screaming fans. This was
no way.
Yeah, this was before we were big in Europe. So we were playing La Cigale, I think it was. It was some like 3,000 or 4,000 cap venue that was sold out in Paris, and and asked her to marry me on stage with the crowd chanting. There's video of it somewhere, man. It was so great.
Oh my goodness.
Man, spent all my money on an engagement ring. I'd saved up a ton of money playing with Halsey, and blew all of it on the ring, like you wouldn't even believe. And man, and then it didn't, like, we didn't know each other well enough, and we jumped in too quickly. That's it. And over the course of a year, we tried to make it work, and eventually I sort of realized this is just not going to work, and then called it. It was sort of, and then we sort of spent another year after that circling each other's orbits and seeing if there was any way to make it work, but it just didn't.
Gotcha.
It wasn't the right. It was so close to the right scenario, but it was one of those scenarios that I knew if I had to make a judgment call at some point, that because I'm getting, every year I'm getting older, and I do want to have a family one day. So I had to make a judgment call at some point, like, am I going to be happy in this, given everything I've learned? And the answer in the end was no. So I moved on.
Has that changed? Has that experience changed kind of how you approach, I was going to say love, but not love, but I mean, finding that someone, like, has that kind of changed how you approach?
Made me completely close off for several years. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, because it was the most painful experience of my life too. You give your all, you give every little bit of your self, and not to mention your finances, but like your soul, and because you're so deeply in love, and you want to make something work so badly, and you plan out the rest of your life based on a person, and then you realize that you made a mistake, or I mean, I don't even know if it was a mistake. It was like, so those experiences are I wouldn't give it up, really. I mean, I think I wouldn't give it up. It was probably the most painful experience of my life, but it also was the experience that made me open my eyes to so many aspects of myself and of my existence. And I mean, Kristen is her name, Kristen Hart. She's a chocolatier in Atlanta, and has a great chocolate company called Cacao Atlanta Chocolate Company. I will love her for the rest of my life. Like, you don't not love somebody that you go through that with, but like, it's one of those things that I was transformed from the experience. And like other painful experiences I've had in my life, I think the hardest and most painful things I've gone through in my life have resulted in the most growth, the most personal growth, the greatest understanding of myself, and also, like, the way that I live and the decisions that I make. When you go through a period where you put all your eggs in one basket, and that basket gets dropped on the floor and shattered, it's a lot easier to make hard decisions later in life when you're like, this is going to be really painful, but I need to do this. And I think that that's something that it's not a thing that a lot of people say in my generation and younger than me, older than me sometimes, but my generation and younger, I don't see people saying this is going to hurt like hell and this is going to be so fucking hard, but I'm going to just walk through this and do it. And you're not going to really live a very fulfilling and meaningful life if you're not able to do that.
I love the way you phrase that. I so agree. And I feel like this, speaking for you, it wasn't a mistake in my eyes because, like you said, I mean, it has shaped who you are and who you will be. Mm-hmm. And it'll further refine, when you do find that someone, like you'll be that much more educated and that much more in tune with what it is you're looking for and how to be the best partner and all that. So,
yeah, there's also a high barrier to entry now.
Oh yeah, but I mean, like you said, had that not all happened the way it did, maybe you would be, less educated and less, further grown on your path toward wherever it is you end up. So
Sure.
No, I'm a firm believer in that. And like you said, whether you at the time realize it or not, but reflecting on it and realizing now that. I mean, for the first thing, you realize, hell, you're pretty capable of going through some really hard times and surviving, first of all, but then probably coming out stronger. So that's probably a pretty good feeling coming out of that.
Yeah. Well, that was, that's one of those things. And when I say the unlikely things that happen to somebody, like, those are the things that, I mean, that was with Halsey too, I didn't, every moment in Halsey, it wasn't like, yes, I love this is great. It was like, okay, this is something that I need to put my entire being into so that I can make something work in a way that it is better than everything else in the world. And I did that every day for 3 years. And with having that mentality while getting on flights, taking overnight layovers to different countries and like working on my laptop on the plane to design the sounds for the next show to try to make it better in the arena because it's a different type of arena that the sound is going to be different in, and like editing at sound check and learning different parts and making keyboard parts super complicated so that A, I could practice on stage, and B, so that I could play all the parts live, because that was one of the mentalities that we had in the band that I was like, when we started, I was like, I want to do everything live. I don't want to, and this was from Vinny's influence too. We were like, we don't want to, we don't want to be one of those bands that plays to a track that has there was a track, but the track had like minimal stuff in it, and I was playing almost every aspect of it completely live, and to do that for 3 years when it's music that is great, but it's not your heart and soul, like that's sort of that trudging through the muck and getting through to the other side too, even though it was glorious and I had amazing moments, and was like, while I was doing that, I was also on stage in front of 15,000 people every night for the last year that I was with Halsey, and for a piano player to be on stage in that way is not, it's something that I appreciate deeply. Like, I have a huge depth of appreciation for doing that, but like being engaged to Kristen Hard is a rarity. Like she before me, like she was dating someone who was a CEO, owner of a giant hedge fund, who had who was super, super wealthy and like could just take care of her for the rest of her life if she wanted to go that direction, like that. So like for me to be in that situation, for anybody to be in that situation was a rarity, and for me to be in the situation with Halsey. By the way, Halsey I say it was luck because we started when she was tiny. Like, the fact that she got that big was not something that we knew she was going to do. Like, I almost didn't even take the gig when we started because of that.
Oh, really?
I mean, not because of that. Let me fix that. It wasn't. I wasn't trying to. I would have liked to be in a band that was that famous, but I was not trying to do that as like, okay, I have to do this, So
yeah.
So she got.
You weren't trying to join a rocket ship.
Yeah, but it turned out to be a rocket ship that we all built piece by piece. I mean, I was a wheel, I was a gear in a giant machine, and the fact that, in fact, when they called me to audition for it, I was like, I don't really do auditions, and he was like, well, listen, just like make a video for me. The person.
I was going to say, how do you audition for like an act like that? Like, what does that even mean?
Well, she wasn't known yet, and they were trying to find somebody. It was Vinnie Farrow who was trying to find somebody who could do well playing her music and design all the sounds. And because I had a technical background with music,
it's like a skill set
and
they're
machines,
looking for.
and I was a pianist as well and could play the parts. It's like I fit that description. Just from him seeing my electronic stuff I had done something called like jazz dance or some stupid like dancey thing that I had put online before that, and I think he saw it and was like, oh, he can do electronic music and he's a badass pianist, so okay, well, let's like give him a shot. But he looked all over LA and New York interviewing as many pianists as he could, like literally anybody who would audition that he thought would he auditioned, and then he eventually was like, he offered it to me, and I had to choose between that and this jobbing band I was in that was set to go and play internationally. And I was like, I almost picked the jobbing band because that seemed to be guaranteeing more. It paid more at the time. I mean, the Halsey gig paid very little at the time, but something fell through with the jobbing band, and I was like, yeah, fuck that. I'll just try this other thing and see if I can add value to the Halsey project. And then we quickly went on tour, and I ended up getting rid of my apartment because of a neighbor who was not okay with me ever practicing, to the point of slashing my tires because he heard me practicing. But
geez.
Yeah. Yeah, welcome to LA, the West Hollywood, baby.
Did he at least like approach you about it first, or was that the first reaction to this?
He had anger issues and got mad at me. He villainized me before he approached me about it, and then eventually approached me about it, but by that time it was too late, and he had issues that he needed to blame his problems on somebody, and I ended up being that person.
Oh, okay.
And so then anytime, he wouldn't even let me practice when he was away out, like he wouldn't tell me when he was away so I could practice, so he wouldn't hear it. So I needed to practice sometime, and I didn't compromise. I didn't say, okay, I'll just stop practicing, because I had my Steinway baby grand piano in my apartment, and because I wouldn't forego that, he slashed my tires, and that was when I called the landlord. I was like, I got to move out, and at the same time, that was the same time when the first Halsey tour started. So I got rid of my apartment, and it ended up being a blessing because I was saving. I ended up not having an apartment for 3 years after that. I was just on the road.
That's interesting. It did work. I love how you turn that into a blessing and a positive thing. I think it's so true.
Well, that's one of the things about life, right? Like anything can be a curse and a blessing, or a curse or a blessing, depending on how you look at it. And I find more and more that the positive mentality, the more of a positive mentality I keep, and the more gratitude I keep in my heart, the more blessings come to me. And that actually, at that point, when that particular moment in time happened, there was I was doing a campaign. So I practice Buddhism through the SGI. It's Nichiren Buddhism, and we chant the words Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and we do it every morning and every night. And I had started a campaign a few months before that called a Daimoku campaign, where you chant for one thing for an hour a day every morning. And I had a friend coming over to support me. He wouldn't let me off the hook. He was like, I'm going to be there with you every morning. We're going to chant an hour. And my thing I was chanting for was appreciation. So it was a campaign for 100 days. And this is because Herbie Hancock told me I needed to do it. And I was like, fuck. Okay, if Herbie Hancock tells me I need to do something, I'm just going to go ahead and do it.
That's dedication, though. I mean, an hour.
Yeah, so 100 days. I had a little check mark for every day. Every morning I would chant for 1 hour for appreciation, just appreciation. And it was near the end of this campaign that I ended up getting called. It was during the campaign that I ended up being called to audition, and near the end of the campaign where I was asked to go on tour, and ended up the whole shit hit the fan with my apartment. I broke up with my girlfriend at the time. I was devastated, but moving on, and it ended up being one of the greatest starting points of my life.
Wow. I'm still thinking about an hour of meditation a day for 100 days straight. It just speaks to what I love about your story and your drive is just that drive and that persistence. And maybe that's coming from your values from kind of the previous generations, but that ability and willingness and no fear to really work hard and work for it and understand that I have to put in the paces, I have to put in the hours, I have to put in the sweat. Mm-hmm. And that whatever comes out of that is my manifestation. So I'm in control of this. So it's only going to happen if I work hard. I see that through everything you do and through you as a person. And just kind of that, your little meditation example there is a great example, I think, of that whole value.
Well, yeah, it's personal responsibility. And don't get me wrong, there are things that affect us in this world. There are so many things that affect us, from like what I'm born with, like the medical situations people have, people's ethnicity, like there are like your friend group, your parents, the level of wealth you have when you were born. Like, there's so many things that affect you, but the only way, literally only way that one can have a better life as opposed to a worse life is to take those things and say, okay, those are things, I accept those things that I cannot control, and these are the things that I can control. So I'm going to do every fucking one of those things that I can control so that I can manifest the life that I want. And if you do that, you're ahead of like 99% of the people, because most people are like, 40% of the US is obese. Why are you obese? Because you eat too much. Like, and then something happens like I'm not saying that there aren't conditions, like, and there's a spectrum, right? But the majority of people, it's not like 40% of the U.S. has a pre-existing condition that makes them more obese than that same 40% in Thailand, like which has a lower poverty level a lower level of the lowest poverty level in Thailand, right? And less obesity, like, so. Sure. So, that if America, I sound like not me when I say that. Is that the United States of America, our system here was founded. There's lots of America. The United States of America was founded on. By the way, it's a Japanese thing. That's the reason I would say America. And the SGI, which is a Japanese organization, they always just call it America, but it's the United States of America.
Okay.
It was founded on. It was founded on the idea of personal responsibility in the first place, and that's why it's become the system that has given the world the greatest innovations that have made humanity to this level, where we used to be at like this level, and we made increments up to that level throughout our entire evolution, and we've made it such a gigantic leap now that we can like control the COVID virus to an extent, whereas 100 years ago, a similar virus happened with actually less death rates and less spread rates, and it killed 5% of the entire population. Like, now we can actually do something about it because we can communicate and organize, and we're not more intelligent, but we're more capable. And it's because the inventions that have been made by people who took personal responsibility for their lives, of every background, economic state, race, and ethnicity, that took their own life into their own hands and built themselves up.
Man, Greg, I could talk to you for hours. I really could.
We can keep going. I don't have a hard cutoff here. I know your podcast is only supposed to be an hour, but I'm having great conversations, so I'll keep going if you want to.
Honestly, it's funny. You mentioned the podcast is supposed to be an hour. I never actually. It's not supposed to be anything. I just have kind of natural conversations with people. So okay. Some conversations are longer than others. Mm-hmm. I'm curious. With a couple of years ago, you left the Halsey tour, and you're doing Spirit Fingers in the jazz, and I know you had the Tiny Room project where you're bringing in artists from all over and kind of doing different versions of their music. What is like kind of the next chapter of your life look like? Like, what is it that you're working toward now?
You know, it's interesting. So one of my things that I have on my schedule for today, every morning I wake up and I do a whole routine which involves meditation and yoga and reading and journaling, and in the journal I write my schedule for the day. One of the things that I have written for today is a thing called fear setting and goal setting. Fear setting, which might even be more important, where you look at the things that you are afraid of happening in the future and the things that you're afraid of not happening in the future, and you like lay those out, and then you look at like, okay, what can I do to avoid these things? How close am I to falling into these pits of terrible existence that are possible for me, right? And how can I mitigate that and go around it and change what I'm doing right now so that I can not do that. And one of the things that I am, and then goal setting, where you figure out your long-term goals. And I mean, I have long-term goals, but you like refine them. And one of the things that I am worst at doing, one of my worst qualities is focus, and sticking to a schedule. Like every single day I make a schedule, and every night I beat myself up for not following it, but at least it makes me closer to having stuck to that schedule. And so I have to figure out my focus for these coming months, really, and years, but really months, because I have several companies. One of them is Tiny Room. One of them is Spirit Fingers. It's a corporation, Spirit Fingers LLC, and it owns the band and the material and all of that. And for Tiny Room, I have investors, and I've got a bunch of material, and then there's Tiny Records, which is being started as a new company, and I have so much material recorded from Tiny Room that I need to release, and that's why I'm forming Tiny Records, and we're forming a partnership with Rope-a-Dope Records and Vidya to have distribution chains. And that's going to take some of my time, but I also have some help. I'm working on getting more help with it, as far as collaborators, and then people that I can hire just for basic low hourly rates to do some of the grunt work, and like inputting things into spreadsheets, right? So I'm going to keep that moving, and I'm going to keep that growing, the label and monetizing the material that we've created over the past 2 years. And then there's the Tiny Room series, which we have our pilot now. We did it as my own, like doing whatever I could with like minimal help and basic sort of minimal production value for a couple of years, and got some notoriety. Like now anywhere I go and tour in the world, musicians and artists know about Tiny Room and what it is. They also know about Weekly Piano, which is kind of funny because people actually know me as Weekly Piano because I don't put my name on it for the most part. Like now people are finally finding out, like people are finally finding out who I am, because I was finally like, fuck it, I'm just going to put my name on it, because like why not? But I was so insecure for so many years about my piano playing and about like the low production value of the channel that I didn't put my name on it. And then I would go and tour in Europe, and people would be like, "Hey, you're Weekly Piano." I'm like, "Ugh."
That is hilarious.
I'm Greg. My name's
that
Greg.
Channel's been going for so long.
I know, it's funny. I mean, I was at a Keith Jarrett concert. He was playing live at Carnegie Hall. I was at the Keith Jarrett concert, and sitting there, and somebody turns to me I was sitting in like the third row, and somebody turns to me from the second row right in front of me and looks at me and like turns back, and he looks at me again. He's like, "Excuse me, are you Weekly Piano?" I was like, "Oh my God, this thing has gotten too big. I need to put my fucking name on it."
I don't know. It might have been fun if you had just gone under this like pseudonym, like even if you weren't insecure about it.
Pseudonym. It's like the worst name ever. Weekly Piano. Like, when I'm weak, or I do it weekly. Like what?
It's so funny because you started that probably just a couple years after YouTube came out, actually, and then like it's grown. But honestly, Weekly Piano is like the ultimate YouTube username, right? Like
Yeah,
it's so
right?
fitting that you
Totally.
would go to a concert
Totally.
and people know you as Weekly
My
Piano.
22-year-old self thinking, what am I going to call my username?
Yeah.
I also started a company called Weekly Websites at the time. I don't know if you remember that, but like
No, I
it
don't
was,
know that one.
it was when website technology was first coming out to where you could do them really quickly and you didn't have to code it. And so I was like, oh, maybe, or 1 Week Website is what it was called. 1 Week Website, the worst fucking name ever.
Oh, okay.
And I made flyers and put the flyers in the mailboxes of my local community so that people would call me and ask me to do their website for $500 in a week. I'm like,
I love your hustle. That's what I've always loved too, is you got that. And I don't, hustle I think sometimes has like a negative connotation, but you have that that positive, like you will do whatever it takes. You're not afraid of putting the flyers in like that's awesome.
Vince Wilburn, one of my friends,
That's so funny.
who runs the Miles Davis estate. He's like big guy, like powerful, strong dude who runs a big company. And whenever I hang out with him, he's like baby gangster. Like you're the little the little white Jewish gangster. Like I'm not. But
Oh, wow.
it's really sweet.
Like I think you got the wrong idea.
you know. But
Oh
wait,
my
I think I
gosh.
totally circumvented a question that you asked. But I don't remember what the question was now. We went off on a tangent.
Oh, I don't remember either. We did, but tangents are great. Tangents are, that's the kind of conversation I love, is where it's a natural conversation, and that's what we're humans do, is we tell stories and we go off on tangents and tell other stories, and that's to me that's the best kind of content out there. That's why I love doing this sort of thing. Is
Yeah.
that's how you get to know people.
Yeah, totally. But that's one of the things, if we take it back to like the core values that have kept me going and have created the biggest successes and the biggest failures of my existence thus far. That's one of the things, has been just like working, but we're working like crazy, like spending all of my waking moments working, and whether that is, it could be self-care, because that's also work. Like I get up in the morning and I do not compromise the hour. I'll wake up as early as I need to in order to get 1 hour of self-care in, which is the journaling and reading, meditation, yoga, and affirmations. But like, there's also, if I didn't have the value of like being uncompromising and always doing the thing that I kind of wanted to do, then I wouldn't be able to have that level of dedication to work. And actually, that has come up in different scenarios where I've done things that I really didn't want to do, and I tried to make myself do them, and I just I turned into a zombie. I'm so excited about things I love, and when I'm doing something that I don't love, I like physiologically something happens. My joints start to creak, and I start to walk like an old person, and I start to get so tired. Like, it's really weird.
It's amazing how our body speaks to us like that. Like, I feel like lately I've become so aware of this, but how the mind and the body truly are connected.
Mm-hmm.
And like the body can physically change and communicate to reflect what the mind might be feeling.
It
It's
tells us
really
things.
fascinating.
It tells us things.
Yeah.
That was one of the things when my engagement was falling apart, that my body was telling me that something was seriously wrong. Was my hips started, and I still have hip problems because of it. But it dates back to earlier. The reasons for it were probably ways I was treating my body beforehand, which was carelessly. I was doing the insanity workouts on pavement, like outside the tour bus for the whole Halsey thing, which is like high impact interval training, and that was probably terrible for my body. But it was in the high stress moments when my engagement and my life at the time was falling apart, that that my hips started like just stop, like it started getting so painful, like to the point where I needed to start getting treatments for it. And I've never done drugs in any significant way, and I am terrified of opiates, so I never took any painkillers for it. I mean, I won't even take a Tylenol, but like that was when my body started to fall apart, and it's gotten so much better since then. and one of the reasons that I exercise daily and keep that as a steadfast part of my life. But the body will tell you when your life is not in the direction that it's supposed to be.
Yeah, it really does. It's amazing. I think that's one of the things that really, makes us human is that connection that is probably stronger within us than other species.
Mm-hmm. I remember the question, by the way. You were asking what is the coming period.
Oh,
like.
yeah, what's next? Yeah.
I never actually answered that. And I'm kind of excited to answer it because I have some exciting things coming up. So aside from starting the record label and distributing all this backlogged material through the record label, which has so many great artists who have come through Tiny Room and played, and some other artists that I'm going to sign to the record label, I am one of the big moments I'm having right now is I've had an idea for 3 years, a little over 3 years, of how to monetize an artist's existence in a better way. And it's something that happened because I needed a system like this for the weekly piano channel, because I noticed that I had all these followers and people asking me questions, but I didn't really have a way to monetize that unless I made a Kickstarter and had them contribute, or if I charged a person individually. And I don't want to talk about the nitty-gritty of what the concept actually is on this because we're still working on the patent, and I have one of the best patent lawyers in the world working on it. And then Latham and Watkins, I don't know if the guy who's working on the patent would want me to say his name, so I'm not. But Latham and Watkins is the legal firm that's also helping me with all of the aspects of the incorporation we've incorporated and putting the patent through. And this is a company that has done this for billion-dollar corporations, led companies to multi-billion-dollar exits in the past. And so I've got a great team behind it, and amazing. I have an amazing co-founder and an interface developer who's working on it with me, and a great programmer now, who's working on it. Who knows? He might end up being on track to be the technical co-founder. But this is. It's turned from an idea 3 years ago into manifesting the interface with one partner about 9 months ago to now we're really moving forward, and there's some investors looking at it to take us to the next level so that we can go really hard and put out this app for artists like me and many thousands of other people who have channels that have 25,000 followers or more, to monetize their channel in a way that nobody's been able to do yet. People have probably thought of it, but nobody's executed this yet. And it's going to be something that it won't only help me monetize my channel, but it'll help everybody up to the major celebrity level take more control over the monetization of their own brand and their own entity. And it will also be an entity that puts money back into the pockets of artists. Because we see that there's a gigantic upset in the creative world, because you have companies like YouTube and Spotify who are distributing all of this artist content, but you don't really see, more so on the YouTube side than the Spotify side, I think, but because I've looked into these numbers, but you don't see this money actually going to the creatives who are making the content that these platforms are building these many billion-dollar empires on. And you see it a little bit.
It's very one-sided.
It's very one-sided, and as an artist myself, I know the system that I would want to use, and so I'm building a system that other artists, I'm pretty sure they're going to want to use this system. It's going to fill such a gigantic need in the marketplace, which I know you're sort of a tech blog, so if your audience members are tech people or investors or whatever and want to get involved, hit me up. I'm just starting this thing. But that might be where the majority of my daily time goes for a period of time, in the coming months as we manifest this thing into the world, because it's such a gigantic value proposition for the world.
Oh, I'm so excited for all this, Greg. I love what you're doing, and I love, you're great. I'm so excited just to continue to see you progress and the impact. You're someone who has such a great, I mean, you have a very positive impact, but you also have a large impact on everything, on the world, on people. And I think that's great. You know, someone with your talent and your expertise to choose to use that in such a way is, you know, we need more of that. So thank you. And thank you for taking the time to do this today. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to all this you got going on.
Thanks, man. This has been really nice. And it's been great to catch up with you. It's been, I don't know how many years since we've had an actual conversation, but it feels like no time has passed.
I was going to say the same. It's been a few years for sure, and I feel the same way. And this is great. We need more of this, so we're gonna make sure not more years pass before
Great.
we do this again.
I love it. Cool.
Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah. If you want to just make sure when you get a chance, send me your recording from your side.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Otherwise, it's a very one-sided conversation.
I was sort of waiting for you to be like, "This is Tim John on the We're Only Human podcast, coming to you live from." I guess you're not live, so I'm the only one live right now. And see, yeah, we still have people watching. That's great. Yeah, so I guess people on my end liked this too. This was a fun experiment. I really appreciate you letting me broadcast this interview live on my own morning show.
Oh my gosh, I appreciate you doing it. Yeah, I think it's so cool what you're doing with the morning show, and it's such, like I said, it's just so you, so enterprising. Again, I've watched, you know, I've tuned in here and there a couple of mornings, and the people you're having on, and the way you're helping others, not only get through COVID, but also just, you know, supporting your musician community. It's fantastic. So yeah,
Thanks,
absolutely.
man.
I'm so happy to be a part of this.
Trying to do what I can, and that's one of those things that I find that the more you give, the more life sort of lifts you up. So I try to, in situations where there's something to give, I try to give whatever I can.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely.
Yeah,
cool.
Man. Well, I'm gonna go and get back to my followers now and play them out a little bit on the Mornings with Greg side of things. So I'll let you go off Zoom.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks again. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, Tim. And wait, actually, before you go, tell people about where to find your podcast.
Yeah, so We're Only Human is the name. You can grab it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, all platforms that have podcasts. Or you could just head over to we'reonlyhumanpodcast.com and find all the episodes there, and also subscribe in all your favorite apps. Comes out every week. I don't have a cool YouTube weekly username yet, but maybe one day I'll be as cool as Weekly Piano.
Don't do it. Don't do it, man. You'll be stuck with it 10 years from now and you'll regret it.
Like I said, I'm just so happy when I was poking around the channel and I went back 10 years, and some of the original videos we shot at your grandpa's house are still on there in that low fidelity flip video camera
the flip,
quality.
Man. Oh, that poor little company that got squished by
that's
the
what
iPhone.
I had, like 3 flip cameras. Oh.
Yeah, me too. They were great. Yeah. Well,
they were amazing. Yeah, I mean, who knew that they would only, you know, we would have phones now that are way better than they ever were. So.
Yeah, totally.
It's awesome. But yeah, we're onlyhumanpodcast.com.
Great. Thank you. Tim John, everybody. We're Only Human. I'm going to let him go. Thank you again, Tim. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Greg.
All right, bye. Oh, man. That was more often. Just kidding. I won't. I will just do stuff that you actually want to hear. Hopefully you wanted to hear that to some degree. Tomorrow, however, oh man, it's weird for me to look at myself on this thing without a hoodie. Crazy. Tomorrow we have a great panel. Bryce Rosenblum, the founder of Winter Jazz Fest. Mike Bindraban, the founder of Good Music Company, a touring agency in Europe, and then some other great special guests. We're going to be doing a panel, and it's going to be broadcast live on Jazz Times via their Facebook page. We're going to talk about the music industry again, because there's a lot to talk about. Talk about what has happened in the past 2 weeks since I did the last panel with them. the things, the options that are available to artists right now to get some help, the tools available for us to sustain during this time, looking forward in our careers, what we can look forward to in terms of touring and live shows in general, what's happening with clubs and agencies and that side of the world, so that side of the industry. I'm very excited to have those really incredible, intelligent speakers on here to hopefully get my ass kicked a little bit, ask some tough questions, and figure some stuff out. Figure out what we figure out what we can do now as a music community for the future, aside from the stuff that I'm trying to do personally and technologically to create some tools. There's some that are already out there that are great. We're going to check those out. And I will see you tomorrow on Mornings with Greg. Thank you very much.